today we're going to be going over how to build a form in HTML and also add some CSS styles to it. And let's get right into it. So I've gone ahead, written a blog post about this, but I'd also like to make this video. So if you go ahead and go into Visual Studio Code, I've created a folder called index.html. And to start this project, we want to go ahead and start adding our form for HTML. So we can go ahead and use the form element like so. Essentially, how forms work, as I've mentioned, in a prior video, a form is essentially 3 steps for at least the HTML. It's the form container, it's the form fields, and then it's the form submit button. So let's start with step 1 is adding the form container. From here, we're going to add these attributes that are, what you need to use for your form container. So we need the method, which is post, and then we have the action, which is the server endpoint. So we can say, let's say it was like /submit. So we have the form container. The next step is to add the form fields. And so for this form that we're building is going to have a name, a phone number, an email, and then also we're going to be adding a select dropdown. That's going to be something new that we're going to be adding. And so we can start adding that. A form field is consisting of 2 parts. You've got the input field and then you've got the label field. So let's go ahead and write those out. The input field is, the most important one. So because in terms of functionality with actually getting the form to submit and work, the input is where you enter the data to then be sent to a server, and the label is just for extra usability, you can say. So we want to add the input. The first thing you want to do is specify the type, and we can say for the name it's just going to be text. We're going to call it ID of name, and then we're going to say name. We're going to give it a name of name, and then we're going to say it's required, like so. And then we're going to do this two other times. We're going to say input phone, so telephone, type is tel, ID is phone, name is phone. And then we're going to do this again. We're going to say email, ID is email, and name is email. And I talked about this in another video, but essentially the ID is more, want to think of client on the client side, and then the name is more on the server side. The name is, that key to whatever value someone enters in the input field. So we've added those 3, and we can view this in the browser so far just to get a feel for what's going on. So we've added the boxes, right? So those are there, but there's not much usability. So we want to, go ahead and add some usability, and we can do that for 1. We can add some break endpoints just to, get these on new lines. And then 2, so we go back, you'll see it's now on new lines. And then the second step is we can add labels. The labels add that usability to a form. So we want to add a label like so. The labels have 1 attribute, and it's going to be the for attribute. Essentially, you're saying what input is this label for, and the label is for, we're going to say the name. The for value, the attribute for the for value is going to be the ID name, and that's what we're putting here. And then we're going to give it the text name. So whatever you put between the opening and closing tag is what appears in the browser, and we're going to do that 2 more times. We can even add a break as well, just to make it nice and neat. And then we can call this phone, we can call this email, and if we go back to the browser, we're going to start to see that form take shape a bit more. So we're all caught up to what we've learned so far. Now we want to add something new, which is the select element, and we can add that and talk about it a bit more. Okay, so we're gonna bring this over, and I'm gonna just add the button as well, just for convenience. But here's the select option. So why don't touch on the select here, and if we go to the browser, we're gonna see here we got a form in HTML. We've got a select drop down where you can select which programming language you want to pick, and then you can hit the submit button. A couple things here, so I want to mention. So With select, it's a new type of input. You're not actually using an input field. There's still think of it as as you have the select instead. So you have select as the input, and you still have that, but then you also have the label. So there's still the two parts. So that doesn't change. So you have the input and then the label, but in terms of select, it's select in the label. So that stays the same. For select, what's really cool about it is for the input, you have the 4 attributes. You have, and we can actually, let's add required here too. We can say it's required. So you'll see ID, name, and required all stay the same. ID, name, required, that stays the same. You'll notice that type is not there because the type is implied by using the select element. So that's something really cool about select, unlike the input, which you have to, because it's more generic, you have to specify the type attribute to let everyone know what exactly this field is for. In this case, for select, that's not the case. So still think of it the same. It's to make a form field, it's two elements. It's the select or the input, some type of input, and then it's the label. Those are always the two you're using. And then for select, to get the value, you're using option elements. And this option element, you'll notice that it uses the value attribute, and that's going to be very similar to the submit button that we added. The submit button has a value of submit, and so does the options have a value. And that value in the browser, at least, is what text displays in the dropdown. So if we said Python is cool, you're going to see that in the dropdown. Python is cool right there. So that text is what shows up in the value section. Yeah, and then that value section shows up in the browser, and that also has some implications on the server end as well. So the same way a submit button, if you change value from submit to maybe you want a delete form, those different values can allow the server to have different options and flexibility on the server end based on whatever option is chosen. So when the submit button for just a regular submit to add data is submitted versus when a form is submitted to delete data is submitted, the server will do something different. In the same way with options, you could have some server-side logic in the same way based on the option that someone chooses. So that gets into more back end, but I want to just mention the power of the value attribute, not just the fact that it has text on the client side, on the browser. So that is the field that we're adding. It's still got those two elements to it to make up a form field. And now we're at the point where we can start adding some CSS. And the CSS today that we're going to be doing, the CSS is, for one, it's going to make the form centered in the browser. So currently, if we go to the browser, it's on the left-hand side here. So we want to put it in the center and today we're going to be using Flexbox for that. And then the other thing we're going to be doing is adding some styles to it, just to make it a little bit more interesting to look at, you can say. So to do that, what we're going to want to do is create 2 files. So the first one we want to do is a reset.css file, and then the second file is styles.css. So the reset CSS is for whenever browsers come with some default styles, and it's useful to eliminate those or make all the browsers work together. And so that's what you're using for when you're creating a reset CSS file. You're kind of having an equal playing field before you start adding your own styles. And so that's what we're doing today. And we can start with the reset CSS file. And to do that, we can go ahead and go to one of my blog posts. We can capture that reset file just by going to that post. And that's going to be that CSS-reset-explain post here. You can check it out on my website, MatthewSeward.com, and we can go back and just paste that in. So we're just copying it from the clipboard, pasting it, and now we've got the reset CSS. The styles, it's blank for now, but we're going to add our CSS here. You could, combine CSS. You could combine the reset CSS with the styles. For the tutorial, I like to break it up. I think it makes it clear what we're doing and not to get distracted by things. So we've added the 2 files. The next thing you're going to want to do is link to your files, your styles. So to do that, you want to do the link tag, and we're going to say, oh, we want to link to reset.css, and we want the relationship. What exactly is the purpose of this link? What its relationship is to the HTML document? We're going to say it's a style sheet, and that's it. And then we're going to do that again for styles.css. The order does matter, so you want your reset CSS to go first because it's read in top-down order. If you put your reset CSS second, it could mess up, the styles you add after. The idea is you have that clean slate, and then you could begin adding styles to your next file. So that's all set up for us, and we can, the form is still there, perfect, and we can go ahead and start adding some styles just to make this a little bit more interesting to look at. So we're in our folder in this specific CSS file, and to start, what we want to do is go ahead and we can start with the body here. So for one, we can go ahead and just make sure. When I was doing this earlier, I noticed it seemed like some of the stylings, the reset wasn't picking up everything. So it's good to can say, hey, for the body I want margin and padding to be 0, just as a fail safe for all of that. But for body, essentially to put this in the center, we want to use what's called Flexbox, and Flexbox allows us to move objects within parents, so children within parents, around on the page, whether it's organizing them in a row, organizing them in a column. There's a lot of different adjustments you can make kind of in flex boxes around, essentially. And if you're new to Flexbox and you want to learn it, there are you can check out my website for more details, but there are sites like flexboxfroggy.com where it really helps you get a better idea of the different types of options you can choose for Flexbox to center divs, separate them from left to right. So all of these options, and so games like this are really helpful that I've found to learn it much easier. So we're going to go ahead and use Flexbox, and to use Flexbox, you got to use display. So you're going to say, hey, I want my body, which is the document essentially of the page. We want it to display flex. We also want the page to be the full viewport. So we want it to be the width. We want it to be 100% viewport width, or VW. We want the height to be 100 viewport height, and perfect. And we're going to say display flex. We're going to say, now that we've essentially enabled this option of flex, now we can use some of the features within flex. And so there's two really important ones. We can say to justify content, center. So that's going to move everything to the center from left to right. And then you've got align items center as well, and that's going to move it from top bottom to the center. So justify content moves it to the middle, align items moves it in the middle from top down perspective. And you can see it's now in the center, perfect. The next thing we can do is we can give our background, we can give a background color. Let's say we want this background to be like a light gray, right? So we've got a light gray going on. To make our form stand out a bit more, let's add some styles to the form, and we're going to target the form element. And for CSS rule sets, all you're doing is you're specifying the HTML element, and then you're adding curly braces, and then within the rule set you're adding the rules, or the CSS rules. So from here we can say we want our background color to be white, like so. Let's give it some padding, like so. We can also give it a border, 2 pixels solid black, and then we can give it a border radius of 5%. And there we go. So we've gone ahead, centered our form. We've gone ahead and styled it a bit. This is really basic, but it gives you an idea of now we're combining not just HTML but also CSS to make our form stand out on the page. And so that is everything I was going to cover today. So we've learned HTML, we've learned CSS, we've learned a little bit more about Flexbox. We've also learned about the new select form field, which is, not much different than the basic form fields that we've learned in the past, which is, an input in a label. It's still in a way an input in a label. It's just now the label is more specific. Instead of using a type attribute, now the label is called a select. And then the options are, within the select to specify, which option you want to choose. So that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good day.